Hello again. I've been meaning to do another vlog for this YouTube channel of mine for quite a few weeks now. But unfortunately, a lot of things happened in June. Nice things, but it just meant that there was too much stuff going on and I didn't have the time. However, today's the day. And this is going to be my second vlog. And I think I did promise you in the last one that I was going to do something which focused on the link that I have between my crochet blankets and my embroidery designs, which have come from the blanket designs. More about that later. First of all, welcome. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And I have to say a really heartfelt thank you to everybody who liked my first vlog and commented and left a comment, because the comments were just amazing. I read them all and I've tried to reply to them all, but it was astounding, and it has given me the confidence to think that you do want to see some more videos and to go on and make more. So welcome back to all these people, and thank you for subscribing to my channel as well. And also welcome if this is your first visit, and I hope you enjoy the video and maybe think about subscribing yourself. You can also click that little bell button which will give you a notification every time I do post a video, so you don't miss any. So yes, thank you so much, and here we go with the second vlog. I'm sitting up here in my studio, and although it's not a sunny day, the light is quite bright, and I've just realised that my glasses are the kind that will darken in sunlight, so they turn into sunglasses. And it looks like I've got sunglasses on. That's just because of the light in here. Anyway, so as I said, this video is about my crochet blankets, and in particular one very special one that it's very special to me, and I've got it here in a pile, and I'm just going to hold it up, and I'm sure a lot of you will recognize it. If I hold it up like this, you'll see it. This is the Beachwalk blanket, and you're not seeing double because that is the second Beachwalk blanket hanging behind me. It was the one that I made last year, and I'll talk about that later, but this is the first one, and this is a very special blanket to me. I'll try and give you a quick explanation. This was made 4 years ago in spring of 2020. And what else happened 4 years ago? Well, of course, it was the pandemic, something that probably, just like me, a lot of people have tried to block from their memories. But just at the time that we went into the very first lockdown, it was March 2020, I was thinking about doing a new blanket. I had been I think I started, or I came back to crochet about 4 years before that, and I'd been building up my skills and producing patterns and blankets for the 4 years. I hadn't actually put too many patterns into my Etsy shop by that time. I think there was 1 or 2, but I was really just honing my skills and considering what I was going to do with crochet. So in 2020, I had in mind that it was time to start a new blanket, and then wham bam, we were in lockdown. I was lucky, and I know that I was luckier and more fortunate than so many other people. For one thing, none of us in our immediate family got ill. We've all had COVID more than once since then, but it's all been after the vaccines came out. So at that time we were safe, we weren't ill. I live in a cottage that's close to a big beach, on the east coast of Scotland. And I realised that, yes, I was really lucky with that because I had a garden and many people didn't have a private outside space. But I was also so close to the beach, and we were told to not go out apart from taking a walk every day, not far from home, within a small radius. And we were able to walk down to the beach and along this big deserted beach every day, in which we did. We took full advantage of it. So I was really, really lucky. I'm also a bit of an introvert, so when the government told you to stay at home, that was not a problem for me. I actually quite liked being told to stay at home, but that's by the by. So yeah, on our daily walks, I took lots of photos and made lots of videos. Because the daily walks were a time of peace for me. I was although I wasn't particularly affected physically by the lockdowns and the pandemic, there was this low-level anxiety that increased as the weeks went on. All this talk about the new norm and would the world ever be the same, and would we ever be able to hug our grandchildren again, this, that, and the next thing. It was always there in the back of my mind, and it was this kind of hum of anxiety. But when I walked on the beach, it was fine. You know, I could relax and think of other things. So I took lots of photos and videos, and I started posting them on Instagram. And I discovered that by doing this every day, there were a lot of people found them peaceful and helpful for their own anxiety, especially if they were people who were living in an area that was far from a coast and a beach, and they couldn't get there themselves. So they looked forward to seeing these videos. I'll put one or two of them up now. And you can see that our east coast of Scotland is not, especially in early spring, is not guaranteed golden sands, sunshine and blue sea. It's dark skies, overcast, often rainy, very windy, windswept, grey seas, big waves. The sand is more silvery grey than golden in that time of year. We did have good days as well, but I was concentrating on the more overcast days when I was thinking about the colours that were, you know, really identifiable with our beach. The rocks are dark. They're quite, they're very, very old rocks, and I think they come from an extinct volcano which is close to our beach, called Largo Law. It's not, you know, I'm saying it's been extinct for tens of thousands of years, but the rocks that flowed from the last eruptions are now the rocks that are strewn on our beaches. And they're quite dark, often wet, and yeah, so it was an overall kind of grey monochrome colour scheme that the beach, and this is the Beachwalk blanket, of course, so these are the colours that were synonymous with our beach and which were in my head as I was taking these photographs. I'll get on to the design of this in a minute. Amongst the photos of the beach, I took a lot of close-up photos of the pebbles and the rocks, and I discovered that although you just look at the beach, you see shades of grey, but when you look closely in amongst the pebbles, you see flashes of different colours. There was the sort of plummy colour of some of the stones, there was the olive green of seaweed, there was even this kind of washed brick orange colour, because in our area of Scotland there used to be brickworks in a lot of the villages, and bricks were made. There aren't anymore, but the sea has washed up old bits and pieces of brick from these brickworks, and you'll find them amongst the pebbles as well. So I was ready to start a new blanket, and I was also taking lots of photographs, so the two just went hand in hand. And this blanket, now it's almost magical, I think, in my opinion, because it took no designing whatsoever. It just flowed. I selected a basket of colours of yarn, and I started in the middle with these 9 squares with the cream background in the middle, and then it just happened from there. And you can see the kind of tonal greys and browny greys throughout the blanket, going light to dark and then light again, but the little pops of slightly brighter colour amongst them for the look of the pebbles. So that got me through the first month or so of lockdown, and then I put a few photos of it on Instagram and Facebook, and suddenly there were a lot of people asking if there was a pattern for it, which, to be honest, I hadn't even considered. This was going to be a blanket for me, and I hadn't thought about writing a pattern, which was silly, because I then realised, of course, that's my next job, but I had to do it retrospectively. I had to look at the blanket, I had to make guesses as to the amounts of yarn, and I had to tweak that a little bit over the next few months, but I had to estimate the colours, the yarns. I had to redo sections of it so that I could take photos. So it was a bit of a silly back to front job, but that took me right through into the summer of 2020. So to have a job to do at home was so good for your mental health. And so I was very grateful that I had the pattern then to write. And then I put it into my Etsy shop, and boy, was I surprised, because the demand for the pattern and the enthusiasm that it received was way beyond my expectations. And I guess it was people who were still locked down and looking for projects of their own to do. They just took to this blanket idea, and it went all around the world very quickly. I think Etsy told me a while ago that it had been sold in 44 different countries, which is just gobsmacking. From the Arctic Circle to sub-Saharan Africa, believe it or not, and away down to, New Zealand and Northern Europe and wherever. But the wonderful thing was that as people started making the blanket, they started to send or post on their own social media or send me photos of their blankets. So I did get a photo of a blanket in sub-Saharan Africa under a tree on a very dusty, red baked sandy background. And I did get a photo of a blanket in the Arctic Circle. So it was just fantastic. I love seeing everybody's photos of the beach walk, because I know it meant so much to me, and it was lovely to know that it meant so much to other people as well. So that's the beach walk. Now, I did say that I was going to talk about embroidery as well as crochet, and this was what happened the following year, because let me just put this to one side for a second. 2021, what happened in 2021? Well, we went into a second lockdown, didn't we? I think it was in January of 2021 this time, so in the depths of winter, but we were told that we weren't to leave the house again, and we were to stay at home and keep ourselves safe. Anxiety started to go through the roof once more, and I do remember watching a film, I think it was, or a series on Netflix, and there was a scene in this film where the two main characters were having dinner in a restaurant somewhere in the States. The restaurant was a big one, and it was busy and buzzing, and lots of people coming and going, and it looked just normal, at least normal up until 2020. And I couldn't really concentrate on the actual story of the film, because I was looking at this restaurant and thinking, will we ever have a life like that again? Which was really an example of how, this low-level anxiety was affecting. So yeah, we were into the second lockdown, and what would I do with that? I had finished a blanket, and I had nothing on my crochet hook at that point, and something made me think about this beach walk. And I thought, this is a blanket, it's a practical object. It might not last forever, because things tend to wear. You're leaning against it if it's thrown over a sofa, or if your grandkids are coming and they wrap themselves up or play tense with it. It can suffer wear and tear. But I felt this design was so important that I wanted something that would make it permanent. And that's where the embroidery side of my background came in, because Canvaswork, which was always been my favourite type of embroidery, and crochet are like that. They're very similar. They're both based on geometric grids. The canvas, of course, the very rigid lines of tapestry canvas, and of course the fact that crochet is formed in squares and lines. I thought, yeah, I could do embroidery based on my Beachwalk blanket. Now, this is for anybody who is interested in needlepoint or canvas work. Crocheters might be interested in the blanket and then part company with me here, but I would hope that everybody would get something out of this. So I picked up canvas. Now I've got a little piece here. I've actually sprayed this piece black, but this is tapestry canvas. I don't know if you can see it. It's single thread canvas, which is the kind that I always use. This is a slightly bigger scale than what I'm going to show you with the Beachwalk needlepoint, but it's the same idea. And like my blanket, I'll be back in just a second. Yeah, where was I? Like my blanket, I wanted to do something that was just going to flow. The Beachwalk had flowed so well that I wanted to do a needlepoint that would flow as well. So the first thing I did was to try to emulate a granny square in needlepoint. And it took I tried a few, discarded a few, and then settled on a block that suited me. It worked fine. I was working on a fine canvas, which is 18 count if you're a needle worker. And the reason I was working with that was because I had inherited, or at least I had collected, a large amount of DMC stranded cotton. And again, my first vlog, that's the first one that's in my YouTube collection, explains how that came about and the amount of colours that I had. So I thought, I'm not going to go away and buy tapestry wool or crewel wool or anything different. I'm just going to use what I've got. So it was going to be stranded cotton and 18 count canvas. Had that, no problem. Once I had, I haven't shown you the needlepoint yet, but I'll show you in just 2 seconds. Once I'd figured out my little granny square in needlepoint, I was able to count the number of granny squares on the blanket and work out the size of my embroidery, which is a complete 2-scale version of the blanket. And I think it worked out, it's about 18-20 inches by 20. It's like a 5th scale of the blanket, something like that. I think it's time I showed you it. So I've got it on the table here in front of me, and if I lift that up, you'll be able to see that it does look just like a tapestry or a Canvaswork version of my Beachwalk crochet, with the centre squares and then the darker bit and then going lighter again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera now so that it's overhead and you can see it in a little bit more detail. Now here is an aerial view of the Beachwalk needlepoint, and you can see a little bit of the blanket behind it now, so you get an idea of scale. These are the granny squares done in the needlepoint, so they're about an inch or so by an inch, compared to roughly 5 inches. I haven't measured them, but that's roughly the idea. Now it took me a little while to figure out how to do the way I wanted it, how to do a granny square. But once I had it, I was able to repeat it all throughout the blanket. And then the areas where I did these little mini grannies, I decided to do something completely different and created this pattern of satin stitches and tapestry, tent stitches, to create this slightly raised looking pattern. I think if I lift that, you might be able to see it more clearly. Sorry about the you get the idea. Put that back down. So if you are an embroiderer or a needle pointer, this will be, like I say, of interest to you. The colours of the stranded cotton I matched up with the colours of the blanket. And the other thing that was important to me was a crochet blanket, especially granny squares, has got holes in it. It's not solid. And so I decided that I would have my canvas showing through in places as well. That's probably going against the grain for a lot of canvas workers, but I felt it was important to have a kind of lightness about the embroidery so that it matched with the crochet. So you can actually see little bits of the canvas showing through, and that was deliberate. And I am quite happy with that altogether. This bit, of course, is more solid because I've used the tent stitches. So this project took me a couple of months to do in that second lockdown, and I became obsessed with it. I can remember it would be as soon as I was up and breakfast in the morning, I would come up to the studio and start work. Now, it's actually harder on the body doing something like this than it is doing crochet, because I had it on a frame and there's a lot of stretching over to get to the center, because I didn't, if I remember rightly, I didn't put it on one of these rolling tapestry frames. I pinned it onto artists' stretchers, so the kind of thing that you would stretch canvas over for a painting. So I pinned it onto that, so it was the full size. So when I was actually stitching, I was leaning straight over into the middle. Here are some work in progress shots of the Beachwalk needlepoint, taken as I was making it back in 2021. Maybe the close-ups here will let you see a little bit more clearly what it looks like. So that's the Beachwalk needlepoint. I know that the first question that embroiderers will be asking me is, do I have a pattern for it? And as yet, no. Not that I'm being nasty. I could say that I want to keep this entirely to myself and I don't want to share the idea of doing it with anybody else, but that really isn't the case. It's just I can't figure out how I'm going to convert this into a pattern. When I do, I will create a pattern for it. But for the time being, this is a one-off. So let me just finish at this point, because I'm going to show you another blanket and a matching embroidery, because I've done several now since 4 years ago. I've done a few, thoroughly enjoying them every time, changing things slightly every time, and I'll show you the next one, and then I'll show you the one that I'm working on just now, and I'll try and show you how I made one of those squares, granny squares, and that might kickstart some of you into trying it yourselves. So I'll be back in a minute. Next up is another old favourite of mine, and this is the Shandon blanket, which a lot of you will recognise. Again, I spoke a lot about that in my last video. It's called the Shandon blanket, S-H-A-D-O-N, because that's an area of Edinburgh, the capital city of Scotland, where my son and his wife live, and I made the blanket for them. So this was the Shandon blanket. This was number 2, because he's got the first one. I love this blanket for the colours and the pattern of the squares in the middle, the simplicity of it, and also the border, because I loved this multicoloured border that went round it. So yeah, I decided that this was going to be one, I think this was the second one to be immortalised as a canvas work piece. And as I look at this, where this is actually needing to be woven in, you can see that over time, this one has been on my kitchen sofa for a good number of years now. Over time, the practicalities of the blanket means that they do go under some wear and tear. So I decided probably that summer, so I think we were coming out of lockdown, I think it was summer 2021, I decided to have a go at making a needlepoint of this one, and here it is. This is the Shandon needlepoint, and I'm just going to have a look to make sure that we've got this pretty much in camera. Yes, I'll put some other still photos of it on so that you can see it in its entirety. But again, I did the same pattern, or pretty much the same pattern, for the granny squares. These are the plain granny squares. I hope that we're getting this in. But in fact, I think I'll stand up so that I can see that we're getting it in. These are the plain granny squares. You could just make them out at the edge of the screen, and that's those ones going around the outside. And then these ones are the same as the center ones I showed you a minute ago. What I did with this one, and I'm going to show you some of the stills, was I decided that because there's so much, in fact there's more canvas shows through because of the type of square the center is. You can see that it's much more open, so there's more canvas shows through. I decided to paint the canvas first of all. So I painted, I think it was just acrylic paint that I used, and I painted each square in the colour of the outside colour of the square, which was the main colour. As you can see, the painted squares don't need to be deadly accurate. I picked the colours and blocked in each square ready to stitch over them. Working with these colours is such a joy. I do remember how much fun I had making this, and that's the slightly more complicated looking edge. And you can see the multicoloured scalloped edging. If you look closely, you might just be able to see that the canvas there is pink, there it's lilac, there it's the sort of soft blue, and that helped to tone down the whiteness of the canvas shining through. So I think I just did it in the centre. After that, everything else was against the white canvas. So this is the Shandon blanket. I had fun deciding on the pattern for the square of that one, and this was area of granny stripe. It's a little bit different, but you can see the granny stripe there and the granny stripe in this sort of satin stitch. And then I had a lot of fun with this on the outside. I decided to go a little bit rogue and do a different pattern. It's a kind of combination of satin stitches. Maybe I'll hold that up and you can see. And that created the outside border, which is this one here. And then I had fun with the colours, the different colours going around the outside. And for this one, I decided to leave the unworked canvas around the outside so that you could see this scalloped border. But I was really happy with that. Now, the Beachwalk and this one, the Shandon, both hang in my home, and I love looking at them, I have to say. Again, this one was very simple to do because I just started and did my blocks in the centre and then worked out from there. So that was the Shandon blanket and the Shandon needlepoint. And lastly, here's a quick look at my current work in progress. When I say current, it has been on the go for 2 years, but this is the Autumn Gold needlepoint based on my Autumn Gold crochet blanket. It's quite important that I do finish this needlepoint because the blanket itself was sold last year for the charity sale, and so this will be my only record of it, and I really want to get it done and hang it in my living room because the colours are going to work so well. It's, of course, granny squares again, and this time they're done in horizontal stripes, which makes it a little bit different. The blanket itself was a big one, so I've still got way to go with the needlepoint, but I think over the summer I'm going to try and pick it up again. It was done on a canvas which I sprayed dark green to start with, and that gives a nice rich background to the stitching. I'm going to add in a few photos of the original blanket just to let you see it, but at some point I'll be able to show this finished and framed as the autumn gold needlepoint. The autumn gold blanket pattern, if you're interested, is available in my Etsy and Ravelry stores, but under the name May Blossom. Both the patterns, the May Blossom and the autumn gold, are in the one pattern together. So that's what to look for if you're looking for the autumn gold version. You can just see the May Blossom in this picture here on the left-hand side. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video journey over the past 4 years, where I have done my crossover between crochet and embroidery, and maybe it's inspired you to try it yourself. Coming up, I've got a little gallery of other ones that I've done, where I've done the crochet first and then the embroidery, and even one where I've done the embroidery first and then the crochet. So I'll let you have a look at that, and I'll be back again in the next video, which I think will probably be about my Christmas crochet blanket, which is on the go at the moment. It's down here beside me, and it's probably about halfway finished. Once it's finished, I'll have another video for you, and this is the sugar plum blanket that I'm going to be introducing for Christmas 2024. So I will see you when that's finished, and I hope you've enjoyed the video today, and as I say, I'll see you again. Bye for now.